Beneath the golden halls of Vienna's Schönbrunn Palace lies a secret buried for centuries. The silent remains of 300 children were discovered under the royal gardens, a mystery hidden in plain sight. This is not a tale of kings and queens, but a forgotten tragedy waiting to be solved. You are about to follow the trail of historians and scientists as they piece together a puzzle that connects a grand empire to its most vulnerable souls. By the end, you will know the heartbreaking truth behind these young lives and the institution that condemned them to obscurity. How did 300 children come to be buried on royal grounds, and why was their story erased from history? What does it truly mean to be forgotten? The first bones were uncovered by accident during a routine survey of the palace gardens. Workers, perhaps preparing for new pipes or simply reinforcing an old wall, struck something hard and brittle beneath the soil. The initial assumption was of an old animal burial ground, a place where cherished royal pets had been laid to rest, but as the careful work of archaeologists began, that comforting theory shattered. The skeletons were small, far too small. They were the bones of children, and they were not alone. With each new scrape of the trowel, another tiny grave was revealed. What began as a curious find quickly escalated into a grim census. Dozens became scores, and then the number climbed into the hundreds. The sheer scale of the burial ground was overwhelming, transforming a quiet corner of the royal estate into one of the most chilling archaeological sites in modern Europe. This was no ordinary cemetery. The immediate question hung heavy in the air, a puzzle for the historians and forensic scientists rushing to the scene. Was this a single, catastrophic event, like a plague pit hastily dug to contain a raging epidemic? The orderly nature of the burials, however, suggested something more deliberate. Could it have been a mass murder, a secret crime of unimaginable proportions? But the bones showed no signs of violence, no telltale marks of weaponry. The truth, it seemed, was buried even deeper. These specialists, the first to confront the silent congregation, realized they were not just excavating remains. They were unearthing a story, a secret the palace itself had kept for centuries. Forensic science became the only voice these children had left. The bones, carefully cleaned and examined in laboratories, began to whisper their stories. The first and most heartbreaking revelation was their age. This was not a group of young adults. The skeletal analysis showed a range from fragile newborns, their bones barely formed, to teenagers on the cusp of adulthood. The majority, however, were toddlers and young children under the age of 5. They were the most vulnerable members of society, a generation lost beneath the garden paths. Scientists then looked for clues about how these children lived and how they died. The evidence was etched into their very skeletons. Many showed clear signs of chronic malnutrition and specific deficiency diseases. Telltale deformities in the rib cages and long bones pointed directly to rickets, a condition caused by a severe lack of vitamin D, which softens the bones. Other skeletons showed the subtle porous lesions of scurvy, a result of not enough vitamin C. These were not the swift killers of plague or violence. These were illnesses of long-term neglect, of bodies slowly failing from a lack of basic nutrients. This crucial evidence shattered the theory of a single, catastrophic event. Radiocarbon dating of the bones revealed the truth. These children were not buried in one terrible year. The burials spanned decades, perhaps even more than half a century. This was not a sudden tragedy. It was a slow, relentless procession of death, a quiet, ongoing crisis hidden behind the palace's magnificent facade. How could such suffering persist for so long, in the very heart of a powerful empire, without anyone stopping it? The answer would lead investigators away from the bones themselves and into the dusty archives of history, to a forgotten institution that held the key to this mystery. The institution responsible for these children was the St. Joseph's Institute, a foundling hospital and orphanage tucked away on the palace grounds. Its official purpose was noble: to provide shelter for the empire's most vulnerable, the abandoned babies, the orphans, and the illegitimate children born to the countless servants and soldiers of the imperial court. In the rigid social hierarchy of the 18th and 19th centuries, these infants represented a problem, a stain on family honor or a logistical burden for the state. The institute was the official solution, a place to deposit these unwanted souls, out of sight and out of mind. Historical etchings of similar orphanages from the era show vast, impersonal halls, rows upon rows of identical cribs in sterile, sunless rooms. It was a system of care, but one defined by scale and anonymity, not compassion. The location of St. Joseph's, as old maps clearly show, was deliberately placed on the periphery of the Schönbrunn estate, close enough for the palace to claim charitable virtue, yet far enough to remain hidden from the daily view of the aristocracy. While the Habsburg emperors like Maria Theresa and her successors, whose grand portraits hang in museums, presided over a glittering court of music and art, a silent tragedy was unfolding just a short walk from their private gardens. The forensic evidence found on the bones tells the story of life inside those walls. The chronic malnutrition and diseases like rickets and scurvy were not random acts of fate. They were the direct result of the conditions within the institute. A diet lacking in fresh fruits, vegetables, and sunlight was a death sentence for developing bodies. Overcrowding and poor sanitation would have made outbreaks of other illnesses inevitable. In such institutions, mortality rates were astronomically high, sometimes exceeding 50%. A child entering its doors was statistically more likely to die than to reach adulthood. The 300 graves are not evidence of a single crime, but of a systemic failure, a societal acceptance that some children were simply expendable. How could such a place operate for so long under the nose of an empress known for her reforms? The silence surrounding these graves was not an accident, but a deliberate feature of the society that created them. In the rigid hierarchy of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a child's fate was often sealed by the circumstances of their birth. Illegitimacy carried a profound social stain, a mark of shame that could destroy a family's reputation or end a servant's employment. An unwanted child was not just a personal tragedy, it was a social problem to be managed, and institutions like St. Joseph's were the convenient solution. They provided a way to maintain public propriety while quietly disposing of an inconvenient truth. The high mortality rates within these walls, while heartbreaking to us today, were a grimly accepted statistic of the era. For the administrators and the aristocracy, it was a simple, if brutal, calculus. The death of a poor or illegitimate child was seen as an inevitability, a sad but normal part of the natural order. The small cemetery on the palace grounds was not a secret to be hidden in panic, but a practical and discreet necessity. It was the final, logical step in a system designed for anonymity from beginning to end. From the palace's grand perspective, this quiet corner of the estate was simply fulfilling its purpose. The royal family, figures like Empress Maria Theresa, who presented an image of pious charity, would have seen the institute itself as a virtuous act. The unmarked graves of the children who died there were an administrative detail, an unremarkable part of the estate's operations that required no memorial and warranted no remembrance. Their lives were considered a cost of doing business, their deaths a quiet closing of the books. This is why the memory faded so completely. There was no scandal to cover up, only a systemic indifference so profound that it erased 300 souls from history as effortlessly as one might sweep dust under a rug. The true crime was not a single act of malice, but a culture that allowed such silence to be the most practical answer. So the mystery of the 300 children was not one of a single villain, but of a system that viewed them as a problem to be managed. Their small graves beneath Schönbrunn Palace are a silent testament to a brutal historical reality, where the lines between charity and neglect were dangerously blurred. This journey from a shocking archaeological, find to a sobering historical understanding forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about class, power, and social welfare in the past. The glittering empire, for all its art and music, failed its most vulnerable citizens, accepting their deaths as a grim but normal cost of maintaining social order. In the years since the discovery, a quiet effort has been made to restore a measure of dignity to these lost children. A simple memorial stone now stands near the site, a permanent acknowledgement of their lives and a place for reflection. It serves as a necessary correction to centuries of silence, a public promise to remember those the world tried to forget. The story of these 300 souls is a powerful reminder that history is not just the tale of kings and conquests. It is also written in the bones of the forgotten, in the hidden narratives that challenge our comfortable view of the past. Their short lives ask us a difficult question: who are the invisible people in our own societies today, and what stories will future generations uncover about how we cared for our most vulnerable? What other forgotten chapters are waiting to be found, and what will they teach us about ourselves? If you have thoughts on other hidden histories, share them in the comments below. And subscribe to keep exploring the past's deepest mysteries with us.